Well, good afternoon, everyone. Wayne Frederick here. Time for another edition of Wednesdays with Wayne. Thanks for taking time out of your day to spend an hour or so with me today. As most of you know, we are in the third session of the Ultimate Listing presentation. Today, we're going to talk value propositions, which are the reasons why someone may hire you. And, you know, as a general rule, I'll just start with this. I don't want you to put too much emphasis on your marketing program as it relates to selling property. There's a bigger issue, and it is the biggest issue. And I referenced it on the video this week. If you saw the little intro video, I will tell you the largest single issue for sellers in any real estate market is communication with their real estate agent. So we're going to talk today about communication protocols, some things that I think you can put in place that just make this whole process a lot easier. I learned this in calling expired listings, and we're going to dig deeply into it. But I discovered that there was just this one huge issue out there that sellers desperately wanted the agent to do a better job of, and it was ongoing communication. So we'll lay out those specifically as the value proposition. But let's get into the Ultimate Listing presentation, session 3, value propositions. Hopefully, if I can get my clicker to work, maybe I can't. So just to get through the order of things, here's what we've been doing, okay? So session 1, we were all about that two-step listing process that I've talked to you all about, calling back and confirming the listing appointment, starting a conversation. The key issue in the presentation piece is covering their past experiences. When they've sold properties before, what have they gone through, right? If you remember those questions, tell me about your past experiences. Tell me the good, the bad, what you enjoyed, what you didn't. And in every case, what they will talk about, their great experiences were short market times and massive communication from their agent. Their bad experiences were long market times and no communication from their agent. So it becomes pretty simple for us if we shore those two things up and explain to them, it makes for a better listing presentation. We're going to uncover the important issues for them this time, right? Uncover important issues. So that's what's the most important thing to you in the sale of your house. What's next? What's that third thing we could add to make it an even better transaction, perhaps the best transaction you've ever had? And we're going to tell them that, you know, I would love to work with you. I hope you'd like to work with me. If I can show you how to do these things, would you work with me? We're going to cover win, lose, and mutual expectations. Then we're going to present pricing. And then the last thing we're going to talk about, which is today, which is the marketing plan and some unique selling propositions that you have. Now, here's the basic theory of this, you know, 3-chunk method. Number 1, every expectation in life breaks down. Every relationship in life breaks down over the lack of checking off on the expectations for the relationship. So the first part that we talked about in session 1 is simply, do you want to be around them? Do they want to be around you? And if we can agree that, hey, we would love to do business together, then let's talk about the value of the house. And if we have an agreement there, now let's talk about the things that we're going to do to sell the house, and let's talk about how we're going to communicate. So that's the session that we're into today. So the first question we got to be able to answer is, why is somebody hiring you, right? So if I come into your city and I'm going to interview you and I'm going to interview 5 other real estate agents, right? Why would I hire you? That's the question we need to be able to answer. And I think at some level, the first reason I'm going to hire you is because the strategies that you bring to the table, the things that you're going to do over and above simply putting me in the multi-list system. That's what most agents are going to do. Then the bigger one is communication. How are you going to communicate? And what I want to challenge you guys to do is not to say, hey, we'll talk a lot, or don't worry, you're going to hear from me, you know, quite often. No, I think we've got to put communication protocols in place. We have to make some communication guarantees to people so that they know exactly what to expect as they work with us. I think that when you get into USPs or value propositions, unique selling propositions, value propositions, the first piece is an explanation of how a marketplace actually works. I've always had this theory that if buyers and sellers understood how the marketplace worked, they would make great decisions. Well, the reason that a lot of buyers and sellers don't really understand the drivers of the market is we don't do a great job of explaining the marketplace. And so I think you start out in the last part of the presentation about, let me just talk to you just globally about how the marketplace works. So here's the first thing. In any market, right, 40% of the properties that sell within their first 30-day cycle of being on the market. In any marketplace, then when you go after 30-day cycle on the market, you start lessening your chances of getting a house sold, okay? Now, obviously, 2021, first half of 22, we saw this thing be massively compacted, or the time frames that really shortened. Now they're starting to elongate it a little bit, right? So the statement at the bottom, if your home isn't sold in 30 days, an adjustment may be necessary. Now, I'm going to tell you this, guys. It doesn't say a price adjustment, right? It just says an adjustment. It's not always price. Now, we all know the vast majority of the time it's price, but it's not always price. And this is where communication becomes so important. We have to be analyzing every showing that we get and telling the seller the responses from each showing, and there will be a pattern to those showings. I'll show you exactly what I'm talking about in a minute. Talking about how important, these are graphs, guys. You've seen these before, right? I mean, this is nothing new. The importance of intelligent pricing. Let me give you my take on how I would explain this to someone, though. Is that if we price your house at market value, and then I would refer back to when we did the CMA, and as we discussed, in today's market value is, I'll pull a number out, $249,000. At market value, we're not going to get every buyer. We're only going to get about 60% of the buyers, but let me tell you who that buyer is. That buyer is the buyer who wants to be in the geographic area where we are, and their requirement is the physical features that we have. Now, if we price your house 10% above that number, all of a sudden now we're only going to get 30% of the buyers. And those are the buyers who have said, need the physical features, but I just want to be in this neighborhood, only this neighborhood. If we go 15% above the market, it's going to be the buyer that is driven by your house for years and said, if that house ever comes on the market, I want to make sure that I get a chance to buy it. And this is a time when, let's be honest, if there are houses like that, there are those very special houses in a marketplace that people have driven by for years, and they have said, if that one ever comes up, I want to buy it. Well, it does allow us, quite honestly, to be more aggressive in pricing. There was a situation that happened a couple of years ago where I live, where a house sold off market, and the gentleman that bought the house was in the process of redoing it, gets a knock on the door one day, and this other gentleman said, I had no idea this house was ever on the market. I need to buy it. My wife is furious with me that we didn't know this was coming on the market. I'll give you $500,000 more right now than whatever you paid for this house. And the gentleman that owned it said, well, this is where two fools are going to collide, you for making that offer and me for turning it down, because no, this is our dream house. So there are properties out there like that. But as a general rule, we need to be priced at market value. Now, if we get under market value, right, if we start getting underneath what a property is actually worth, now we're going to start picking up 75% of the buyers. Who is that buyer? That's the buyer who has said, hey, I'm looking for a pretty good deal. If we get 15% below, you got nothing but bottom feeders and investors coming in. So we just want to drive home that point to people that we need to price at market value, okay, unless they have one of those special houses. And this is why I'm telling you, this is a two-step process. You need to be armed and ready for all these various conversations when you're going through this. Maddie, I saw that Donnie Woodard had raised his hand. Donnie, you want to jump in and ask a question?
Donnie, you should be able to speak.
Donnie, you got a question or a comment? Don't know why we can't hear you. Maybe try typing it into the chat and we'll have Maddie ask it. I'm gonna continue to move on. Another key graph, chart, whatever you want to call it, is sales price versus timing, because sellers need to desperately understand this. Again, if you think back, this is kind of the basis for the whole presentation. There is a direct correlation between how many days we have on market and asking price to sales price ratio. The smaller the number of days, the more control the seller has, therefore, the closer we're going to get to full price. So what we see happen is activity starts out when we first hit the market, bam, we should see a flood of people coming through, and then it starts to ebb after a week or two, and then it levels off, and then it starts to drop. And the only way that we can restart that enthusiasm in the marketplace is doing one of two things. That is an upgrade of condition, or that is a lowering of the asking price. Maddie, I see that somebody's typed in a question. I'm assuming it's Donnie.
Yes, it is. So he says, what do you tell people when they ask where you get these numbers or percentages, and where do you get them? You said that if we list at market value, we'll get 60% of buyers. And if we go 10% above, we'll only get 20% or something like that.
Where did I get those numbers?
I believe. Yeah, where can he find those numbers?
It's Donnie, I'll be really frank with you. It's a theory that holds true if you think about it. There are certain neighborhoods that people are just like carry more weight, carry more value than others, where people say, I want to live in X. I want to live in X neighborhood, or I want to live in X elementary school. And so that's a limited number of buyers. If you have a subdivision that people want to live in, I'm lucky enough to live in one of those subdivisions that people are always trying to buy houses where I live. And that allows you to be a touch more aggressive in pricing. Okay. So is there a hard, fast, like I can back this up with pages of statistical data? No. What I'm trying to do though is drive home the point to people that you've got to have a pretty special neighborhood or a pretty special price to start pushing the limits and ask more money. Okay. And the sales price versus timing tells us this as well, that the longer we're on the market, the more the showings start to drop off, and we want to make sure that doesn't happen. Another big issue is buyers absolutely buying price brackets. Now, we're very much into a payment-driven economy. We're back into that at this point. As you've heard me say before, isn't it crazy how much cash was in the market in 2021, and all of a sudden everybody's worried about interest rates? And that's because we're a payment-driven economy. Buyers find out how much money they can. If you think of how a buyer works their way through this process. They go in, they find out how much they can afford, and almost to a person, people start out saying, I don't want to spend that much. But they know in the back of their mind they can. So they go out and they look at properties in a lower price range than what they can afford. They don't like any of them, because one of the dynamics of buying houses is it's a system of compromise. As I've said before, if you can spend $30,000 for a property, everything you ever wanted in a house is going to cost you $50,000. If you can spend $300,000, it's $500,000. If you can spend $3 million, your dream house is a $5 million house. So buying a house is some level of system of compromise. Buyers absolutely max themselves out most of the time. Once they're told how much they could borrow for a house, they will go do that based on the monthly payment. So if we're priced in the wrong bracket, I just did an analysis with one of my clients the other day on this. He sent me all the numbers on a house that he has listed, and the marketplace was screaming that this house needed to be under $600,000. All of the activity was under 600. And the funny thing about buyers is once they get in a price bracket, they don't differentiate among the houses in the bracket based on dollars. They differentiate based on features that they can find. All right. So in this analogy, and I granted these numbers are low, but in a $130,000 buyer will never see a house that's in the 140s because they can't go get it. Now they'll look in the 120s, but they won't try to buy it because they know they can spend in the 130s. Buyers tend to max themselves out before they buy. And the bottom line is we're a payment-driven economy. This is a concept that went away in 2021 and mid-22, and it has come raging back. Sellers need to understand we are in a payment-driven economy. It is all about down payment and monthly payment. And this page right here, in some fashion, guys, should be a part of every one of your listing presentations. Okay? In some form or fashion, this is, I used to call this the mother of all pages. Every home that sells goes through 3 levels. Every single solitary time. All we're really playing with is how long does it take it to go through the 3 levels. So the first level of selling any house is agent excitement. And the only way we get agents excited is by where the house is and how much we're asking for it. And we never get all of the agents excited. We only get the agents excited that have a buyer looking in that location and in that price and with those physical features. All right. The second level is because the agents were excited, they turned around and called their buyers. Now, we would historically say you should expect 8 to 10 showings in the first 2 weeks. Well, in 2021 and mid-22, it was 8 or 10 showings in the first 2 hours, and it was bidding wars. We're starting to see those time frames elongate out a little bit. The third level, and the point that we must get to every single time before a property is going to sell, is we're always one of the top 2 or 3 houses, because what one buyer likes, they all like. What one dislikes, they all dislike. They're all looking at the same homes. So if we list your house today, here's what we need to watch for. If we put it on the market and no one comes through, we don't see agents calling about it, we don't see traffic through the portals and things like that, we have a problem. Now, the problem is one of 2. Either the agents didn't think the value was there and they didn't call their buyers, or we are in a slot in the marketplace where literally there's no activity. And that can happen. Okay? But if we put your house on the market and we don't get activity, we have a problem. And we need to discuss what that's going to be. If we get the agents excited and they bring their buyers through, but it's a one-off showing and the buyer never comes back, we still have a problem. The point we have to get to is one of the top 2 or 3, because you'll hear sellers say this a lot. We've had a lot of traffic, but nobody tried to buy my house. Well, if we have traffic and no offers, we have an issue, and that's why we have to communicate regularly so that we're on the same page. So here's when we get down to the marketing plan. Anytime we list a home, there's 4 things that I'm trying to do. Number 1, get as many qualified buyers into your home as possible. I will tell you what I would always say to this point. I'm going to let you in on something. You're going to find that a lot of the buyers that come through are not qualified to buy your house. Now, that's part of the process. And let me tell you what I mean by that. They have the financial ability to buy a home. A lot of them have a financial ability to buy a home in your price range, but they have something else that has to happen before they can buy a house. They have a lease that has to be completed. They have a house that has to be sold. We're only going to find a small percentage of the buyers that are actually in the position to be able to pull the trigger right then and buy a house. Here's the interesting part. They all come in the very beginning. There's a pool of buyers out there that has looked at everything on the market, and they've said, let me know when something new comes up. Those are the first people that ever come through your house. All right? That's why, and again, this is kind of going back and referring to the data that we pulled out of the CMA and things like that. Second, decision get the highest dollar value with the least amount of problems. Selling your house is a hassle. I'll just tell you that. You have to leave your house a lot. You have to keep it clean. The longer this goes on, the harder this gets, the more of an interruption of your life. If I'm doing my job right, your life is going to be incredibly interrupted for a short amount of time. Thirdly, you can expect me to communicate the results of our activities to you. We're going to talk a lot, and here's why. anytime I take on the task or the duty of selling someone's house for them, I want you to understand one key component to this. The only people that care if your house sells are me and you. The marketplace does not care. So we've got to work together. We've got to be on the same team. We've got to analyze all of the responses that we get from all of the showings so that we can make the best decision for y'all and y'all's situation. And four, to look for the best ways of exposing your property. That's the marketing piece that we do. So the first thing is, you hear a lot about Zillow, Trulia, Realtor.com, all of these various things. You know, whether you list with me or whether you list with someone else, all of these portals are going to pick up your property. They pick it up through the multi-list system. Okay, so I think it's important that we explain to people, hey, here's how the buyer works today. The buyer goes to various sources to find out information. If you do targeted social, if you do videos, if you do all that, this would be the point that you would talk about it next, right? So what we've seen with consumers is pretty interesting. Consumers go online just an inordinate amount of times now. It's the way that we buy most products. We start our searches all online. So that kind of validates the portals. Now, if you're doing social media, okay, then this is the point where you'd want to talk about it. And I would want to see you put in, if you're doing videos on your houses, I would want to have you, you know, probably before this, but at least now, let me show you the social media advertising that I do. Let me show you the marketing that we're doing. All right. Next, and this sounds so basic at this point. It used to be a huge value proposition, quite honestly, that you brought in a professional photographer and a videographer. Guys, it's industry standard now. If you're not using professional photos and videos, you're actually behind the curve. So while this is you know, it's a value proposition to a degree, if you're not doing this, God, please start, because it's a big deal. Maddie, do we have a question? See something there in the Q&A.
Yes, I was going to pull it up for them, but they wanted to know what was number 4 in the objective in marketing your home. They missed it, but I was going to go find it for them.
Oh. Number 4 is just to look for the best ways of exposing your property to potential buyers. That's just the marketing that we do. And guys, that's whatever marketing that you have chosen to do. Okay. Again, professional staging, hey, used to be a big deal. It's industry standard now. If you're not professionally staging your properties, you need to get with the game. Target market your neighborhood. This is something that's actually fallen off the edges of the table. I still believe it is a very viable way to create interest in a piece of property, and here's why. Even though we have all these different communication avenues, we really haven't changed as people. And what I mean by that is, if there's a neighborhood I want to live in, and I know someone who lives in that neighborhood, I'm going to tell my friend in the neighborhood, hey, I would really like to live in your neighborhood. If you know of something coming up, or when something comes up, would you please let me know? So what we want to do is we want to get the neighborhood working for you. So I'm going to send out a just listed postcard to everybody in the neighborhood. All right. It's just it's still to this day, one of the ways that people find properties, right? We don't want to just solely rely on them looking online or looking at a Facebook ad or Instagram or whatever. Direct line sign calls. Now, this is going to depend on your own state laws where you are. Okay. So you're going to want to research this. It's also going to depend on your own company policies. There is a great strategy for direct line sign calls. And here's what I mean by that. All right. That whatever number is on your sign, that phone number is answered by you. Okay. Or if you have a team, by one of your team. And the way to position this, all right, is there's still a lot of real estate companies out there where the dominant number on a sign is the office number. And so I used to play a little game, and I've still played this game recently. Ask the seller to call one of your competitors that has that. And they're going to get routed to a floor agent at best, who's not going to know that much about the property, as opposed to now call this number. And it rings your phone and you immediately answer it. And guys, I'll be honest with you. No one can handle a phone call on your listing better than you can. So use that simple little thing, which is basically the way we're doing business anyway at this point. Make sure that if you can, if state law allows it, if your company policy allows it, that the dominant number on the sign is one that goes directly to you. Okay? Just a very small, yet pretty powerful value proposition. Then we're going to get into the big one, the communication plan. Guarantee you that I or we, depending on whether it's you or a team, will call you once a week to discuss our progress, and I guarantee it. And as a matter of fact, we need to decide before the meeting is over today the time and day that I'm going to call you, because I'm going to call you the same day every time. Okay? This is huge. Okay? What ends up happening in the evolution of a listing is everyone is always really excited when we start. The seller's really excited. We've got our house on the market. Here we go. We've cleaned it all up. We're vacuuming the carpets before every showing. And the agent's excited because it's like, hey, we've got some traffic. I'm going to bring the information sheets by. And then this excitement for all of us starts to ebb over time. And then we don't contact the seller nearly as often. And then toward the end of a listing agreement, most agents have not contacted that seller at all. And this was the playing field for me on calling expired listings. Okay, that's where I learned this. So you need to guarantee a weekly phone update, even if we haven't had a showing. I'll call you every week, even if I just call you and say, hey, nobody came through. All right? Or I'll call you every week and we'll discuss where we are and the showings and things like that. Guys, it is impossible for you to over communicate to a seller client. All my years of brokerage, I never had a seller client call and say, your agent drives me crazy. They call me all the time and give me updates on what's going on with my house. It never happened. You can't over communicate to a seller. I also think you should give them a 48-hour feedback guarantee. Now, there's nothing magical about 48 hours, but you need to give them a guarantee that you can abide by. Maybe it's 48, maybe it's 72. I doubt that it's 24 because you can't sometimes get the information quick enough. So probably the shortest time frame would be 48 hours, and I'll put some legs on this here in a second. Maybe it's 72, maybe it's 96. But I do think there needs to be some type of feedback guarantee that you're making to your clients, that you're going to follow up every time. We have a question, I think, from Janine.
Janine, if you'd like to go ahead and unmute yourself, feel free to ask your question.
I'm sorry, I hit that by mistake.
Oh, no problem.
Okay.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you. Okay. And in addition to that, I guarantee you we'll call you within 48 hours of every showing. Here's exactly the questions we're going to be asking. All right. Now, a lot of you are using the automated systems for feedback, checking for feedback from other agents. I would challenge you or invite you to take these questions and load them into those systems if that's the format you're using. And here's the reason why. So number one, what did the client think about the layout? What did they like or dislike about it? What was their price range? This is where we start to figure out that this person really wasn't a buyer for our house. Here's the key question. Of the homes that your client looked at, are we one of the top 3? If we're not, why aren't we? If we are one of the top 3, what do we have to do to be number 1? And once I hear that from the other agent, I will turn around and call you. I'll never play your hand out, but I'll let you know in real time exactly where we are in how we stack up. And then we'll have a discussion about, do we want to make some kind of a move toward these people? But I would never do that without talking to you first. Have they bought another home? And if they have, where? And if they did, why? What did that house have we didn't have? And as an agent, could you give some comments or suggestions about the home or its price? Every time we get a showing, we're going to reach out. We're going to ask these questions. I guarantee you we'll call you within 48 hours of every showing. I'll also tell you this. A lot of times I'm going to call you and tell you that I never heard from the other agent. That normally means they didn't really have a buyer and we're just going to move on. Okay? I'm sorry that it happens to you. I'm sorry that there's probably a situation where we may have an agent set an appointment and not show up, or they may spend time in your house and they won't get back to us. I'll apologize right now on behalf of the industry, but this is the process that we have to go through. But I will promise you, I will call you within 48 hours of every showing without fail. In addition to that, every 2 weeks, I'm going to send you a report, and it's going to let you know what's going on in real time in the market, because one of the issues is that the marketplace is very fluid. It moves around. So every 2 weeks, you're going to get a report in the mail. It's going to tell you how many properties are currently listed that we're competing against, and how many have gone under contract in the last 2 weeks, and how many have expired or withdrawn. If you get a report that says there were no sales, don't worry, because we haven't missed anybody. But if you get a report that says there were 2 or 3 sales, we need to talk, and we need to make sure that in real time, as I said before, the only people that care whether your house sells are me and you. So we've got to have this massive free flow of communication. So if you hire me to sell your house for you, guarantee you'll call you after 48 hours of every showing, guarantee you'll call you once a week, guarantee you'll get a report in the mail every 2 weeks so you have real-time knowledge of the marketplace. We'll give you the addresses of all the houses that you're competing against and the ones that might have gone under contract. So if you choose to, you can go drive by. My job is to keep you in as real time as we possibly can, to arm you with all of the information that I have. I think it's one of the travesties of real estate sales that a lot of times an agent has information that they don't give out to their client. I want you to have all the information you could possibly have so that together we can make an educated decision.
Wayne, we've got a question in here just confirming those weekly reports, they're sent out via USPS or through email?
Either one, whatever your preference is. These also become the basis for a lot of the weekly phone calls. So if you've ever been challenged with getting price reductions, okay, a weekly phone call and a biweekly report will help you out massively with price reductions, because you can call the people and say, by the way, did you get the report we sent out earlier this week? Yeah, I did. Any thoughts? Well, it looks like everybody's selling their house and we're not. Yeah, I saw that too. What do you think we need to be doing? I don't know, Wayne. What do you think we need to be doing? You know what? Doing a little deeper analysis, it looks like we're just a touch out of the marketplace. Yeah, and then it gives you a really nice way to continue to give them more and more data and analyze the market on a regular basis. Okay, so whether you send them USPS, whether you send them in an email, is irrelevant to me. Some clients, are not going to open their emails. Other people don't go to their mailbox. One of the questions, though, if you remember from the first sessions, was how do you prefer to communicate? So get that in the communication protocols when you're going through the questions. Looks like we got a couple more questions now, Maddie.
We do. People are asking where they can get the decks. And just as kind of a blanket response, your broker host receives the copy of a recording of the session, the PDF of the slides, any materials that Wayne references. They receive those on the Friday following a Wednesdays with Wayne session. So if you're having trouble getting some of those resources, make sure to check with your broker host, or you're welcome to email me directly at admin@STF Consult, and we can get you connected there as well.
All right, perfect. Here's the last thing, cancellation guarantee. Guys, if you want the ultimate value, and I told you there were two huge value propositions in the video that I shot that we were going to talk about. One of them was communication protocols. Here's the other one, the cancellation guarantee. If you're not completely satisfied with my service, you can fire me at any time, guaranteed. I promise you I will have the sign down by the end of the day. All of us, I believe, all of us. If a seller called you and said, I don't want to do this anymore, I'm done. I don't like you. I know my house isn't going to sell, whatever. We would all let them out of a listing agreement. I hope you would let them out of a listing agreement. Get in front of it and use it as a value proposition. Because it allows you to look at people and say, look, you list with me, it's like listing your house 24 hours at a time. If I'm full of beans and nothing that I'm telling you comes true, you can fire me. It's no problem. I get it. I don't think you should be locked into a long listing agreement. And then here's a cancellation guarantee, some dialogue about a cancellation guarantee that you can take and you can customize for your own for your own uses. But the biggest value that you bring to a seller year in, year out, all the time, no matter what, is an explanation of the selling process, what they're about to go through. Communication along the way, and the right for them to stop this process if either they decide they don't like you or they decide their property's not going to bring the amount of money that they wanted it to. Why wouldn't we just stop? Okay?
When we have a couple,
go ahead.
we have a couple questions and comments here. One says, can this be a two-way cancellation? Some sellers are difficult and I want to cancel them.
100%. Yeah, you can fire a seller. Absolutely.
And then
there's no reason you couldn't.
We've got another one here that says, what about a shady seller who wants to cut you out if a buyer knocks on their door?
Okay. So check your listing agreements, but most listing agreements have a protection clause in them. Okay. I would give you the right to fire me, but I would also, this is just how I did it. I gave you the right to fire me, but I had a 180-day protection clause in the listing agreement. You can fire me, but you can't sell the house to somebody that came as a result of my efforts or that was shown the house by another agent without having to pay me. And we would explain that when we went through the listing agreement. All right. So you got to remember the fourth piece of this puzzle is when we actually fill out the paperwork. And I would walk them through these various clauses, whether you have dual agency or whether you don't, your transaction brokers. I think it's important that you explain all of the nuances of the listing contract. And that was one of them in ours, as there was a protection period. So I would say, look, as I said earlier, you can fire me anytime you want to. What you can't do is fire me and then turn around and sell the house to someone that I showed it to, or that was a result of my marketing efforts, or that another agent showed it to. You can't do that, but you can. So I hope that answers the question without me going down a complete rabbit hole. Okay. So the next session, and then we're going to try to sew all this up for you. We have a role play that I recorded. I'm actually going to be traveling on the 22nd is the reason that I can't actually do a role play live. But we have a role play recording that we recorded toward the end of last year that we're going to play for you that takes this whole process from beginning to end, right? From the packets to dropping off, to the conversation, to the pricing, to the value propositions, just so that you guys will have something to refer back to. That'll be our next session on the 22nd. Maddie, it looks like we've got a few more questions, and I'll just, for lack of another way of saying it, we'll just open everything up for questions now on anything we talked about today.
Great. So a couple of them, one says, I believe our listing agreements cancel any prior procurement claim if the property is relisted with another brokerage.
If ours did the same. Ours did the same. If it was relisted with someone, what I was trying to avoid was the seller firing me and then turning around and selling it to a buyer that looked at it and then knocked on the door and said, hey, why don't we get the agents out of the way? Yes, I don't know of a situation where Another listing agreement doesn't cancel out all responsibilities to the previous listing agent. I dealt with this a lot in the expired work that I did, definitely.
Great. We have another question. How many brokers will sue a seller for a commission if the seller cuts you out and sells to the buyer who knocked on their door?
I don't know that I can hang a number on that, but I have. I will tell you that as a broker, I did it. It only happened once. We pursued them. We settled. Look, I think these are great. Look, I think, to someone's point of, can this cancellation work both ways? These agreements work both ways. You're not subservient. You don't have to take whatever they dish out. So yeah, I think this is an agreement. I do think it's important you explain the entire agreement to everyone. I was actually quite controversial at one point when I was on the forms committee for my local board years ago, and I proposed that we put places for initials by each paragraph of the contract for a buyer and seller to initial that this had been explained to them. And the AE looked at me and said, we can't do that because these agents can't explain this contract. And I said, well, that's a sad commentary on our business. And I will just make another comment about that. In today's world of DocuSign, Dotloop, SkySlope, and all the other things, we're probably not explaining these documents as much as we should. We're probably just sending them over, doing electronic signatures and moving on. My contention, and because my overarching deal is to try to protect brokers and agents in this process. My contention is the more we do online, it's easier. I get it. Electronic signatures and the whole thing. The more value proposition is being lessened. This is still a nose-to-nose, chin-to-chin, face-to-face, voice-to-voice business. And we need to really upgrade the quality of our conversations that we're having with people in order to protect your commission dollar. This is what the third parties are counting on, is that you won't do it. And that ultimately they're going to turn this into like an Amazon purchase where you just go online. You read a couple of reviews, you have somebody send you the paperwork over. It's happened in every other industry. I don't want to see it happen to us or to you. Any other questions?
As always, you're welcome to send your questions in the Q&A or the chat, or you can raise your hand and we'd be happy to let you ask your question yourself.
All right. Seeing no other questions, thank you guys for your time today. Work on your listing presentations, work on your pricing strategy, work on your conversations. March the 22nd, if you'll tune back in, you have a recording and you can watch this thing over and over, but it's me running through this exact dialogue that I showed you. Now I see we have a couple of people asking questions.
We have some thank yous coming through.
Oh, okay. Okay. Anything else? If not, we will close for today. Thank you so much, as always, for your time. Appreciate you guys. Have a great couple of weeks, and we'll see you on the other side. Have a good day. Bye-bye.